Princess Zara had never seen real trees before, and the forest on this strange planet called Earth made her heart race with wonder and fear. At the same time, because she was not supposed to be here at all, and her father would be very angry if he knew she had left the ship without permission, but she could not help herself anymore after spending 3 months locked inside the royal vessel, watching this beautiful green world from the observation deck. The Valkyrian Empire did not allow its people to walk on primitive planets, and her father, King Theron, was especially strict about this rule because he believed that contact with less advanced species would corrupt their superior culture and bring shame to their family name. But Zara was tired of being treated like a fragile crystal that might break if she touched anything real. And so when the guards changed shifts during the night cycle, she slipped out through the cargo bay and activated her personal shield before running into the dark forest. She had been walking for almost an hour when her foot caught on a thick root and she fell forward into a small clearing where the moonlight made everything look silver and magical. And as she pushed herself up from the soft ground covered in fallen leaves, she heard a sound that made her freeze completely because someone else was there. Jake Miller had been camping in these woods for 3 days trying to clear his head after losing his job at the factory, and he was sitting by his small fire cooking beans when he heard branches breaking nearby. And at first he thought it might be a deer or maybe a bear. But then he saw her, and his mind went blank, because the girl who stumbled into his camp was the most beautiful and strange person he had ever seen in his entire life. Her skin had a soft blue tint that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, and her eyes were large and purple, like amethyst stones, and her hair was long and white like fresh snow, and she wore clothes made from some kind of material that shimmered and changed colors when she moved, and Jake knew right away that she was not from anywhere. On Earth, Zara stared at the human male sitting by the fire, and her translator device quickly analyzed his language and appearance, and she knew she should run back to the ship immediately. But something about his face made her stay because he looked surprised but not afraid, and his brown eyes were kind and warm like the fire. He sat beside. "Can you help me?" she said in his language, and her voice was soft and musical, and Jake nodded slowly, even though his brain was screaming that this could not be real, and that he must be dreaming or going crazy from being alone in the woods too long. "What do you need?" he asked, and his voice came out rougher than he wanted, and he cleared his throat and tried again, saying, "Who are you and where did you come from?" "My name is Zara, and I come from very far away," she said, and she looked back over her shoulder, as if checking to see if someone was following her. And Jake saw fear in her strange, beautiful eyes, and he felt a sudden urge to protect her, even though she was clearly more advanced than any human. "Are you in trouble?" he asked, and Zara nodded and wrapped her arms around herself even though the night was not that cold, and she said, "My father will send soldiers to find me soon, and if they catch me, they will take me back to the ship, and I will never be allowed to leave again. And I just wanted to see what freedom felt like for one night." Jake stood up and walked closer to her, and he could see that she was shaking a little, and he said, "You can stay here with me if you want, and I will not let anyone take you anywhere. You do not want to go," and he meant it, even though he had no idea how he could possibly fight alien soldiers. Zara looked up at him because he was taller than her by almost a foot, and she felt something strange happen in her chest, like a warm wave spreading through her body, and she had never felt this way before, and her tutors had never mentioned this sensation in any of their lessons about other species. "Thank you," she whispered, and Jake smiled at her and gestured toward the fire, saying, "Sit down and get warm, and tell me about yourself and why you ran away." They sat together by the fire, and Zara told him everything about her life as a princess in the Valkyrian Empire, and how her father had arranged for her to marry a commander she had never met, and how she felt like a prisoner in a golden cage, and how she wanted to experience real life just once before she was locked away forever. And Jake listened to every word and felt his anger grow at the thought of someone treating her like property instead of a person. As she talked, the hours passed quickly, and the fire burned lower, and Zara learned that Jake had also felt trapped in his own life, working at a job he hated, and living in a small apartment with no real purpose, and he told her that losing his job was actually the best thing that ever happened to him, because it forced him to leave and think about what he really wanted. "What do you want?" she asked him, and Jake looked at her glowing face in the dying firelight and said honestly, I want to help people, and I want to feel like my life matters, and I want to find someone who understands me. And Zara felt her hearts beat faster, because Valkyrians had two hearts, and both of them were racing. Now, I understand you, she said quietly, and Jake reached out slowly and took her hand, and her skin was warm and soft and a little bit electric, like touching a battery, and neither of them moved for a long moment. Suddenly, bright lights appeared above the trees, and a deep humming sound filled the air, and Zara jumped to her feet and said, they found me. And her voice was full of panic, and Jake stood up too and said, where can we go, and how can I help you? Zara looked at him and made a decision that would change both of their lives, forever. And she said, come with me, and she grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the trees. And as they ran together through the dark forest, the lights followed them, and voices called out in a language Jake could not understand. They reached a steep hill, and Zara said, we must jump, and Jake saw a river below them, and he said, are you crazy? But Zara smiled at him and said, trust me. And she activated her shield device and wrapped her arms around him, and they jumped together into the darkness. The shield protected them from the impact, and they surfaced in the cold water and swam to the other side, and climbed up onto the muddy bank, and lay there breathing hard and laughing because they had escaped. And above them the lights searched the forest but could not find them anymore. Zara turned to Jake, and water dripped from her white hair, and she said, thank you for trusting me. And Jake said, thank you for showing me that impossible things can happen. And then, without thinking, he kissed her, and she kissed him back, and it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. They stayed hidden in a cave by the river until morning, and Zara explained that her shield would hide them from the scanners for a while. But eventually her father would find her, and Jake said, then we will figure something out together, because I am not letting you go back to that life. As the sun rose over the forest painting, everything gold and orange, Zara realized that she had found exactly what she was looking for. And it was not just freedom, but connection and understanding, and maybe even love with a human who saw her as a person and not a princess. Jake held her hand and said, we should probably come up with a plan. And Zara laughed and said, yes, probably. But for right now, can we just watch the sunrise together? And Jake smiled and said, absolutely. And they sat there together, watching the light spread across the sky, knowing that whatever happened next, they would face it together, and that was enough.